What if Jinwoo was in Jujutsu Kaisen? How would the presence of an S-rank hunter change the tragic fate of this universe? Would the union of Shadow and Infinity be enough to rewrite history and save everyone from tragedy? After all, how did Jinwoo end up in Jujutsu Kaisen? Look, Jinwoo is practically a god at the end of the manhwa, so if we bring this version into Jujutsu Kaisen, it wouldn't be any fun because he would defeat everyone in an instant. But for the scenario of this video, I chose the Jinwoo from the end of the second season. Logically, he's still very powerful. After all, Jinwoo has Beru as a trump card, an advanced level dragon, and he just cleared an S-class dungeon by himself to get the elixir of life for his mother. So, after a fight against Beru on Jeju Island, a red gate appears and Jinwoo springs into action. However, this gate takes him to the universe of Jujutsu Kaisen. Instead of Jinwoo appearing right in the first episode of the anime, he shows up in the past, meeting Gojo and Geto while they were attending Jujutsu High. The real absurdity of this story isn't how the Infinite Shadow Army destroys the Curse hierarchy, but rather how the presence of this hunter changes Tsumigi's tragic fate and creates a fatal flaw in Kenjaku's plan during the Culling game. But hold that thought, we'll get there. So, how does Jinwoo appear in the past? He spends years adapting to the world of Jujutsu and figuring out how to return to his own world. The system converts mana points into cursed energy points, and naturally, Jinwoo fights every curse he encounters, searching for the dungeon boss. After all, only when the boss is defeated does the red gate open for the hunters to exit. The similarity between Jinwoo and the world of sorcerers leads to him being noticed and recruited by the Jujutsu school, learning everything about this new world. Jinwoo joins Gojo and Geto's team and notices that Jinwoo is extremely strong, and this changes Gojo's mind forever. Think about it. Gojo has always been the peak of the mountain, the untouchable one, but now he looks to his side and sees a guy who summons ant generals and demon bears. Gojo never develops that almighty god complex so strongly. Why? Because he has an equal by his side. When the bounty hunter Toji attacks, the result is a reverse massacre. Toji loses this fight because Jinwoo pressures him violently with his elite soldiers and with Beru himself. This forces Gojo to awaken his reverse curse technique, not in the absolute desperation of near death, but fighting side by side with Jinwoo. The two become an unstoppable duo and keep rising to absurd levels of power. And this is where the tragedy repeats itself. Geto, the third member of this trio that was supposed to be all monsters, can't keep up with the pace. He gets stuck at the base of the mountain. Watching his two best friends become deities, resentment grows silently. Because of this overwhelming frustration, Geto still becomes the villain we know, and all the events of Jujutsu Kaisen 0 happen in the same way. Jinwoo, alongside his army, protects the city while Gojo returns to Jujutsu High and stops Geto from taking control of Rika. And moving further ahead, we reach the first episode of Jujutsu, and Yuji eats Sukuna's finger. And when the King of Curses awakens, Jinwoo's system detects the dungeon boss. When Gojo shows up to save Megumi from Sukuna, the one by his side is Jinwoo, already aware of the threat, but also aware that Sukuna is not at full power. So, here's the question. Will defeating Sukuna in this state open the red gate so he can return home? Notice that Jinwoo figures that it's better to be safe than sorry. So, after capturing Yuji, the higher-ups freak out in panic. They demand the immediate execution of the kid. Gojo makes that classic deal. Yuji lives, tracks down all 20 fingers, and only dies at the end. Our protagonist joins the school. He meets Nobara, and the first mission of the main trio goes as it should, until the top brass decide to play dirty. The old men in suits send Yuji, Megumi, and Nobara to the juvenile detention center. Their plan is simple and cruel. They know very well that a special grade curse is waiting inside. The idea is to force Yuji to release Sukuna and use that as the perfect excuse to execute him. It's a death sentence disguised as an official mission. But there's a deadly detail they forgot. Gojo already knows that the old men are hunting his student, and he has a friend who controls his own darkness. Gojo tells Jinwoo to place a soldier in the shadows of each of the three rookies. Just as a precaution, the mission moves forward and starts to go wrong very quickly. Despair takes over. Yuji is getting beaten badly, almost broken, to the point where he needs Sukuna to avoid dying. The sorcerer is ready to give up control, but suddenly, from Yuji's shadow, a person emerges. The shadow swapping ability is activated in the blink of an eye. Jinwoo comes out of the ground, breaking through the special grade curse barrier, just with the overwhelming pressure of his presence. He looks at the creature that was torturing Yuji and simply destroys it effortlessly without breaking a sweat. The monster is exorcised and erased from existence before Sukuna even has a chance to show up. This changes the course of the story forever because Wu solved the problem. Yuji stays alive without resorting to extremes. Megumi never has to fight alone against the king of curses out there. And most importantly of all, Yuji is never forced to make that treacherous binding vow with Sukuna. The kind of vow that would let the king of curses take over Megumi Fushiguro's body later in the story. Yuji's secret training doesn't exist anymore because Megumi and Nobara already know he's alive. He still does that control training by watching movies, but now there are no more secrets among the trio. Their dynamic becomes even stronger. And it's with this feeling that the worst is already over that the story moves forward to the exchange event with the Kyoto school. The higher-ups are furious that they failed, and Kenjaku needs to act. This event was supposed to be the perfect stage for the cursed disaster, with a barrier over the forest, designed specifically to keep Satoru Gojo outside. But here comes the greatest irony of this whole plan. Common sense in the Jujutsu world says that a high-level barrier is the perfect spatial defense against intruders. However, Kenjaku made a fatal mistake. He built a wall to block people and cursed energy, completely forgetting that shadows don't need to break down doors to get in. They're already inside. So when Hanami appears, Jinwoo simply uses the ability to switch with one of his soldiers, which he left with the students, and appears in the middle of the battlefield. Instead of Maki and Megumi almost dying trying to buy time against Hanami, the entire forest freezes in fear. Jinwoo doesn't give the curse any room to even breathe or make that half-hearted speech about nature. He summons his shadow generals, surrounds Hanami, and crushes the special grade. Before there's any chance to escape, everything ends very quickly. But this brutal ease comes with a hidden price. Since Yuji didn't go through that near-death moment fighting alongside everyone, he ends this phase a little weaker than in the story we know, and that leads us straight to the real hell on earth. October 31st arrives and Shibuya becomes a sea of absolute despair. They're trapped underground and the worst curses are laughing in society's face. And this is where you need to pay close attention. The way Jinwoo deals with the chaos and controls the city is now the main factor that prevents the end of the world later in the story. If you don't catch this war tactic he's using now, the twist that will destroy Sukuna later won't make any sense. Notice that the curses set up the trap focused only on Gojo, threatening to massacre the humans if anyone else steps in. Gojo, being the giant that he is, accepts the challenge and goes alone. And just like before, he ends up sealed in the prison realm. Jinwoo can't stop this in time. When the hunter finally steps into Shibuya Station, the strongest sorcerer in the world has already disappeared, and the monsters are loose, hunting innocent people for sport. Everyone who watched this arc felt that pang in their chest, seeing the characters we love being brutalized with no hope of rescue. If you also almost threw your phone at the wall out of frustration, seeing the losses in Shibuya, leave a like here, so I know I wasn't suffering alone. But I assure you this time, the script of tragedy is torn in half. As we know, Jinwoo went through the whole process of evolution, both physical and mental, to get where he is. And you can also achieve great things. You're living like an NPC, you wake up tired, you procrastinate everything, and you feel like trash at the end of the day. Another month dragging on and nothing changes. Enough of letting failure respawn. Let me introduce you to my ultimate personal system of organization and productivity, which turns your routine into an RPG of personal growth. You'll level up while having fun, earning coins and rewards for completed tasks. This system is based on methods used by CEOs and high-performance athletes like GTD, Eisenhower, Pomodoro, and much more. It's fun, it's addictive, and it works. You've already wasted too much time. Click the link in the description and start leveling up your life like a true protagonist. Jinwoo doesn't act like a desperate sorcerer running around aimlessly. He acts like a true war commander. To hold back special level creatures, he spreads his army throughout the entire city. Hundreds of giant ants, Shadow Bears and Elite Knights start forming shields around the civilians to escort them out of the danger zone. The first order is to clean up the mess and ensure safety. Dominating the streets with a force that can go head-to-head with any cursed army. In the middle of this pandemonium, Jinwoo finds Yuji completely beaten on the ground after fighting Choso. Instead of leaving the boy bleeding, the hunter gives him a healing potion and gets him back on his feet instantly. From then on, Yuji starts moving through Shibuya Station alongside Jinwoo, and that simply destroys the enemy's strategy. The curse's plan was to wait for Yuji to be on the verge of death, to force him to swallow Sukuna's fingers and release the King of Curses. Since Yuji is safe and protected, Sukuna remains dormant. The Shibuya incident turns into a relentless hunt. While Dagon's cursed domain is activated, Megumi creates an opening for the sorcerers to escape with his domain expansion. And as we know, Toji enters it. But here, the situation is different. Jinwoo and Yuji enter together. In a matter of seconds, Jinwoo eliminates the curse. And when Megumi is about to come face to face with his reincarnated father, Jinwoo steps in to fight Toji. And this time, Toji doesn't need to regain consciousness and take his own life because Jinwoo does the heavy lifting and defeats him face to face. Right after that, Jogo appears, destroying entire blocks with fire until he comes face to face with General Beru, who is watching the fight from a distance. Jinwoo does the shadow exchange, pulls Jogo closer, and starts beating him up with the same ease that Gojo did at the beginning of the story. But Mahito, one of the most dangerous curses, even tries to escape to cause more damage, but with Yuji helping. And by focusing the damage directly on the soul, the worst of the curses is almost exorcised without mercy. The only reason it wasn't is because Kenjaku interfered and absorbed Mahito, escaping with his power. The huge losses disappear. Todo doesn't lose his arm, the casualties plummet, and the nightmare ends much faster. But with Gojo absent, the suited executives from the top brass try once again to kill Yuji. The problem for them is that Jinwoo takes responsibility and becomes the boy's new absolute shield. And no one on the face of the earth is crazy enough to go against an immortal army. The Culling game begins exactly as Kenjaku planned, throwing sorcerers into the colonies to fight for their lives. But notice that Jinwoo spreads his shadows throughout all the colonies, watching each of the players closely from the very first second. The intense fights keep happening, and the sorcerers still have to sweat to earn points and move forward. However, the absolute helplessness disappears because no one is left behind to die alone in the dark. And Yuji keeps having his brilliant moments of growth as a fighter, facing the worst threats head-on. Megumi also fights non-stop and becomes much stronger. Yuta wipes the floor with powerful players, proving his overwhelming strength. Meanwhile, Maki continues to be that unstoppable monster on the battlefield. All the big names have their moment to shine. The difference is that Jinwoo and his soldiers always intervene before a tragedy happens. And it's exactly this immortal safety net that leads us to the answer to that question I asked at the beginning. Remember the juvenile detention center and how Jinwoo saved Yuji before the worst could happen? That single action completely destroys the tragic future of the original story, since that treacherous binding vow was never made at the beginning of the story. Sukuna doesn't get the advantage he needed. The King of Curses never manages to steal Megumi's body. At no point does it happen. The chain reaction from this saves the most unlikely people, without Sukuna controlling Megumi's abilities. Tsumiki is never dragged into that disturbing end and survives the Culling game. The two siblings finally have a real chance to build a future away from the horror of curses. Besides that, the sorceress Hanakurusu, known as the Angel, she doesn't fall into the trap of false innocence that almost took her life in this timeline. With Hana safe and actively using her power, Jacob's Ladder. The plan to free Satoru Gojo from the prison realm works perfectly and much faster. Therefore, when the seals are broken and the strongest sorcerer in the world returns, he doesn't find a ruined society dominated by fear. He finds a living barrier of shadows led by Jinwoo, who kept hope alive. The mastermind behind all the evil, King Kenjaku, needs to deal with Gojo and Jinwoo at the same time on the battlefield. It's such an absurd and overwhelming level of power that the mastermind behind the disaster has nowhere to run. He even tries to move his pieces and prolong the conflict for a while, but his chess game is over. The two monsters find him and eliminate him brutally before any other apocalyptic spell can be cast. The war loses its master. and it collapses almost immediately. That gigantic final battle, full of deaths against Sukuna in Shinjuku, simply ceases to exist. Kashimo remains alive, having to accept that his dream fight won't happen, and Higuruma doesn't need to sacrifice his genius in the deadly courtroom. Chozo embraces his humanity and doesn't throw his life away to protect his younger brother. The number of lives saved by Jinwoo's tireless army is immeasurable, and the last piece of this puzzle comes down to the most dangerous prisoner in the world. What to do with the King of Curses now that Kenjaku is already out of the game. Sukuna is the true boss of the dungeon and the final key for Jinwoo to return home. Without the threat of the binding vow and fully protected, Yuji safely consumes the remaining fingers under the supervision of the hunter and Gojo. So when the King of Curses finally awakens at his peak with 20 fingers, he expects to spread terror. But with the help of the purification power of the sorceress Hanakurusu, combined with Jinwoo's authority of darkness, Sukuna's soul is ripped out and separated from Yuji's body without putting the boy's life at risk. Sukuna materializes as the true boss of the dungeon, free from any death sentence, completely safe. Alongside Megumi and Nobara, Yuji watches from the outside while Sukuna awakens in a rage, only to be surrounded by Beru, Gojo, and the immortal Shadow Army. In overwhelming combat, Jujutsu Jinwoo crushes the King of Curses without giving him any chance to react, exterminating the threat and fulfilling the system's final requirement. The legendary Red Gate finally opens before the hunter, allowing Jinwoo to return to his dimension, leaving behind a Jujutsu universe completely transformed and peaceful, where Gojo and the entire new generation live the future that has been secured. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like down below, so I can bring more crazy theories like this one. And of course, watch this video where Itadori gets Jinwoo's system from the very beginning of his journey and see what he would change in the story. I'll see you there, otaku.